Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to TGIF this morning. It's lovely to see a good crowd for a very important discussion. For those of you who are new to TGIF, this is a meeting here in Stellenbosch. We meet once a month. It's a non-denominational forum, discussion forum for thinking through important issues, the intersection between Christianity and public life, thinking through politics, science, economics this morning. It's my privilege to introduce our two distinguished guests this morning, a professor of economics, Dieter, and a professor of engineering, Herman. They can maybe say a few words about themselves, but also welcome to those joining us online. So we've got a few TGIFers from Joburg this morning, wanted to join in on the conversation. But they're speaking this morning on a very big topic: can we solve inequality in South Africa? And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. We have been for a while, so very warm welcome, guys. And yeah, I think over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just move my elbows like this. Where's Stella? Is she all right? Yeah. She looked very good coming in the second time. So the recovery was just massive. Okay, yeah. I don't think we don't have to introduce ourselves massively. Dieter is very well informed about economics, and I know nothing. I think that's the important thing to say. Just quickly, where does this come from? So we had a second baby a month and a half ago, and that left me with some time in the middle of the night to stay awake, stressing about stuff. And one of the things I stress about is the future of our country. I really want my children to be able to grow up here. And so I think about the economics and that people would be well off in South Africa. And so in the middle of one of these nights, I found a solution to inequality in South Africa. And the solution was, there are these people in universities and all over the place called economen. I don't know what that is in English, economicists, okay? And they must have thought about inequality a lot already. And they must have the solution, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Dieter what the solution is to inequality in South Africa. And then my responsibility and your responsibility will just be to vote government into power that can execute the Dieter plan. And then we just need to hold them accountable, and then inequality will be solved. Okay. And so I asked Stella to ask Dieter to give a talk, and then somehow I ended up here asking these questions. So Dieter, you will solve this problem for us this morning.
Okay. Thank you. If I could do that, I would be very famous, which I'm not. So, but you know, if we really had all the solutions to inequality, it would really be wonderful. But inequality is a very hard topic. It's a very slow-moving thing. It's not something that we can solve just like that. Inequality happens at many different levels. So as an economist, we usually think of it as income inequality. But of course, it's very, very different to just income inequality. It's because we know that there's inequality in terms of how people are valued, structural inequalities such as power dynamics. There's also inequality even just in how tall people are. That's something which we study, right? So are people healthy enough or not, right? But we often focus on the most obvious thing that's easiest to measure, it's income, and it really tells us a lot about what came before that. Now, we often think of inequality as being bad, right? It's this big, bad boogeyman, and it is. But it can also not necessarily be bad, right? So let's distinguish between the different kinds of inequality that you can get. Right, so you all might know the Gini coefficient, which is like if it's 0, it means everybody owns the same. If it's 1, it means one person owns the whole economy. Right, and South Africa lies somewhere about 0.6, 0.7, which is one of the highest in the world. And this is where everybody starts stressing, because we have the highest, this figure, and it's out there, everybody talks about we have this highest figure in the world. And to be frank with you, it's been like that since 16-something. Okay, we've measured this, it's been this trajectory forever. So there's two types of inequality. It's this kind of forever inequality. And in fact, most countries in the world had this 0.6, like always. But what usually happens is as countries develop, there is a sense of there's an increase in inequality as they industrialize. It's the first movers who start a new industry. They obviously come and create inequality. It's like Herman was saying the other day, if Bill Gates came to South Africa and brought all his money here, we would be happy, right? But he would raise the Gini coefficient massively in one go, right? It's a good thing if it brings innovation. But that's kind of a temporary inequality if what happens is that people catch up. And it raises economic well-being and other people start getting drawn into, let's say, this new industry that gets developed. But the problem comes in is when the people who fall behind don't get drawn in. And this is in some senses how you can view South African inequality. There's been this difference between rich and poor for centuries. And there's been shuffling a little bit, but not a lot of changes. If we look at the post-apartheid era, in the first 20 years post-democracy, what we saw is actually, interestingly enough, there were reductions in poverty, but no reductions in inequality. So I would summarize it as saying the rich got richer and the poor got richer, right? And that's odd. It sounds odd because inequality was maintained by just the rich getting very much richer, but the poor not also getting a bit richer, but not catching up enough to be able to narrow these massive gaps. And that was essentially one of our problems. So how do you solve these kinds of problems? So we tried minimum wages. It helped poverty, but it didn't get us out of the woods. We could say that we could get social grants, right? It helped to reduce poverty, but it didn't take the poor as far as the rich. So things actually changed a lot in South Africa in terms of poverty for the first, let's say, 20 years. But then things started stagnating, and poverty rates, especially after the financial crisis in 2009, stayed level, right? So we really need to think of this as this is a problem that's been with us for centuries, and it's not one of these problems which is just going to go away. And it's not one of these problems where you're going to have this one magic bullet and it's going to solve it. It's an all of society problem. I often like to say that inequality starts, it was a bit confusing when I said this to Herman, it starts in the womb. It starts before people are born. And, we have a lot of evidence for this. The first 1,000 days since conception, people already start experiencing inequalities from what they inherit from their parents, even just in terms of the nurture and the care that they get over there. So it's an intergenerational thing. It's really intergenerational. And how do we break these really, really deep-rooted problems?
So if you had to come up with, or maybe I should put this out there, like there's a ton of things I thought about in the middle of the night, solutions, right?
Yeah.
And around the rugby game, you hear people like, the government just needs to solve this, this, and this.
Yeah.
So what I'm quickly going to do is I'm going to list some of these things that I thought about and other people have thought about. But you're not allowed to speak. You're only allowed to say yes or no for whether they're going to solve it.
Okay.
And while I'm listing these things, the rest of you can also think of some golden bullets that you think can solve inequality. And then, so I'll go through my list. Then you guys can shout out some random stuff. You're only allowed to say yes or no. Okay? And then after that, I'll allow you to expand on your favorite golden bullets. Okay? Does that sound? Okay, so only yes or no. You've already mentioned one, social grants, yes or no?
No.
No. Okay, cool. This is the one I believe in. Education. If we solve education, then our inequality and poverty problem will be solved. Education, yes or no? You can say maybe.
Can I say necessary but insufficient?
Yes. Wow. Okay. I accept this proposal. Okay, necessary but insufficient. Okay. So that was education, but you're going to say that same thing for everything. But okay. So try and say yes or no.
Okay.
A friendly investing environment. So you're basically bringing in money from outside of the country. You often hear this on RSG. Someone says like the Ramaphosa just needs to make this country a little bit more investor friendly.
I'm sorry, necessary but insufficient.
Okay. Higher taxes.
I'll go with no.
Yes. Okay. Land distribution.
You make it really difficult for me to.
No, go.
qualify
No or
this.
yes. Okay.
No.
No. No for land. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other things. Golden bullets that will solve.
Parastatal companies, big companies. Eskom.
Now I have to ask questions. How?
Okay, yeah. Wow.
Fixing the big state-owned enterprises.
No.
Structural reforms to the labour market.
Yes.
Okay, wait. It's
I didn't plant her, I promise.
in the labour market. Okay, you will expand on that because I don't know what any of those words mean. Okay, so but this is afterwards. Anything else? Yes, Carl.
Getting rid of minimum wage.
No.
Interesting. Controversial.
It's hard to say yes or no, because. Sorry, can I
Go.
talk?
Yeah.
Because the evidence is still very mixed on basic income grants, but the only thing I've got to go on is the social grants, where we have already lots of experience. It reduced poverty, didn't reduce inequality.
Okay, maybe reindustrialization.
I think it links a lot to the friendly investment environments. I have to go with necessary but not sufficient. Yeah.
Maybe one more, but this needs to be a good one. Maybe two more.
What about the apocalypse?
The apocalypse would make us all equal. Yeah.
So it is a solution.
It's a solution. And
Yeah, go.
can I talk about that? I didn't mention that, but there's equality of outcomes and equality of opportunity, right? Equality of outcome is not our goal. Because if we had equality of outcome, somebody gave me this really good example. If somebody dies at the age of 30, we have to kill everybody who's above the age of 30 to achieve equality of outcome. Equality of outcome can be very destructive, if to put it quite frankly. But equality of opportunity, that everybody has the same opportunity and we acknowledge that everybody has the same value before God, that's something very different. That everybody has the same opportunity for healthcare to be able to live a full and long life. That's something very different. Yeah.
That's an excellent one. There was one more, and then two more, and then it's yes or no. Go.
Is the equality of opportunity a pipe dream? Is that tenable?
It's something we can try to achieve, but I also don't think we'll achieve it 100%. Yeah, but it's something we can move towards in a very proactive way, yes.
Cool. Last one, Lizzie.
If everyone in the country were like really perfect Christians, would equality be solved?
If everybody was perfect Christians, I mean, it depends what you mean by perfect. Before the fall or after the fall. Before the fall, maybe. But even at the fall, we could see that Adam and Eve wanted to be like God, right? And to me, that's also an important thing. We will never have equality with God. So in some senses, inequality is a natural part of our system. We will never be equal with God. Before the fall, we were all in equal value. But after the fall, even in Acts, we saw Christians really trying to live really good lives. They tried to achieve it by sharing their goods, but there wasn't necessarily equality. People were squabbling. Yeah, people were squabbling.
Awesome. Okay, I think that was really helpful. I'm quickly going to run through them again and then just ask you. You can comment on them.
Yeah.
So a few things you said were I'll focus on the interesting, necessary, but not the only thing.
Yeah.
And then I'll focus on the yes one. So you said education is necessary but not sufficient.
Yes.
A friendly investing environment is necessary but not sufficient. And then you said structural reforms in the labor market.
Yeah.
I wrote that down. You'll explain what that means. That was the only one. I think you said yes. Okay. So can you unpack that, and then I'll focus on the no bits. Okay. So education, investing environment. I guess you've mentioned this as well. There are also basic things like healthcare for everyone. Yeah.
So education and healthcare, let's put them together. They bundle together very well into equality of opportunity, right? So I can't access a good job if I don't have the same education as you. We found in a lot of our work that a lot of inequality and discrimination already I said it happens in the womb, but it happens in the education system. So South Africa has like a two-tier education system. You've got one that's kind of looks like a developed country and one that looks like like a poor country. And this already means that people are getting very different opportunities to access good jobs. The problem is it's not going to guarantee that people are going to access good jobs, because that's just the kind of skills that we develop. But can I jump to the other one? Labour market reforms. If we don't have jobs to give people, but everybody's lined up with let's say everybody has a university degree, but there's no jobs to offer everybody with a university degree, it's not going to solve inequality. So do we need a lot more university degrees? Do we need a lot more education? Do we need a lot more good quality education? Undoubtedly. This is, for instance, something that happened in Brazil. They saw a lot of decline in inequality between 1994 and 2004, and the expansion of education was a part of that. We've seen massive expansion in years of education in South Africa. It hasn't shifted the dial on inequality. Do you want to come in here?
Yeah, because you don't have to measure years of education. It's not the right measure. So the right measure is quality of education. And that,
it's very, very important, quality of education. And because we, in some senses, we still have two education systems in a very important way. But I'll jump to the labour market, because these things are inextricably linked. We in South Africa have a very strange labour market, and by labour market I mean jobs. We have this combination, we also have these two worlds. So if you look at a typical emerging market country, a typical African labour market, it's defined by an informal sector, a massive informal sector. People who are selling things along the road, they're not registered in a business, they're creating employment for themselves, or they're cultivating the land. We don't have a labour market that looks like that. We actually have a very big formal sector, and it's jobs like which I would say people typically sitting here work in the formal sector. You've got a job, you have a contract, you're paying taxes. That's kind of like a formal sector job. We actually have a massive formal sector in South Africa for an African or a developing economy. And in some senses, when we say we need to create jobs, we're talking about that. But in some senses, we've already done very, very well on that front. So then the question you might say, okay, should we then create informal sector jobs? And that's a very tough question to answer, because these aren't great jobs. These aren't jobs where people are moving out of poverty. These aren't jobs where you're actually reducing inequality. So it's really this gap between the formal and the informal sector that's massive. So what are the things that the formal sector can do? After the financial crisis, the government created a lot of jobs, and this helped, right? That helped a lot to not make inequality worse. But the problem is it's been unsustainable. I'm going to sound like a neoliberal capitalist here, okay? At risk of having my head chopped off here. But we actually do need the private sector to create jobs. And this is where what the government has been talking about a lot is structural reforms, something that was mentioned here. We need to make it easier for the private sector to create jobs. We need firms to invest, and this comes from the reindustrialization, right? We need firms to create formal sector jobs, and to do this we need to make it easier for them to do so. So we need to remove impediments to creating jobs. It's really hard part of this is setting up a business is really hard in South Africa. You hear of in other countries people being able to set up a business online in a couple of days. But in South Africa you have to register your business, you have to register for tax, you have to go to 10 different offices to do this and stand in 10 different queues. It's really difficult to set up a business. Yes? Louder. Okay. So yes, this week we had the amendments to the Small Enterprises Act, because small businesses really struggle to set up businesses. And this is where we say, okay, so we've got these informal sector businesses which are trying to create jobs themselves, trying to formalize. Maybe that's one of the silver bullets, but they can't. They're just never going to do it because it's so hard. So how do we support small businesses to become job-creating businesses, right? And this is like a structural reform where we say, let's make it easier for small businesses to become big businesses, where we make it easier for small businesses and big businesses to create jobs. We've done things like actually pay firms to create jobs, where you get especially to give young people to create jobs, we've let them claim back on their taxes. It's like a subsidy. We've subsidized jobs. It's worked a little bit, right? This is why I never say there's one silver bullet. It's created a few jobs, but it hasn't like shifted the dial. We have a massive youth unemployment problem. Massive, massive, massive.
So do you think, so government has done some things, and in a way when you say make it easier, it's almost like saying government should almost do a little bit less, you know? So apart from making it easier for people to come in, if often we think of government as the one that's supposed to solve this problem, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's mostly on their shoulders, and if you look at successful economies, it is often government policy that affects things.
Yeah.
So apart from making things easier for people to come up and maybe doing a little bit less, what are other things that government could and should do in order to solve this problem?
So let's go back to investor friendly. So this is kind of what happened in Brazil. So Brazil and us are the poster children for economic inequality. Historically, right, we've had inequality that's been high forever. And what they did, I mentioned 1994, it was their economy was wildly unstable. And they actually decided to stabilize their macroeconomy. They decided to contain inflation. And that's why a lot of people hate our Reserve Bank, because they're raising interest rates to keep inflation. And that's part of the inequality story, right? Because if you have macroeconomic instability, then it usually affects the poorest the worst, because the wealthy can hedge, they can hide, they can hedge themselves. The poor cannot. So macroeconomic stability is something that helps the poor, and it actually helped to create the environment to reduce inequality. So I mentioned it's actually the Reserve Bank that needs to do that. They're not government, by the way. They're actually a private shareholding institution, but they work a lot with government. But the other thing which we can do is we can create stable fiscal policy. So the fact that we have such high debts at the moment as a percentage of GDP, it's a double-edged sword, because we're creating debts so that we can spend more on social policy, so that we can help the poor. But we're creating more debts, which means we pay more interest, which means we're really destabilizing our fiscal position, which means that if, for instance, there's a crisis, it'll hit the poor first. So it's a double-edged sword. So what else can the government do? Well, the government has done a lot in terms of we've mentioned social grants. We've got one of the most extensive social grants programs in the world. It's really helped to reduce poverty. You can ask the expert sitting here in front. But it's really helped to reduce poverty. Without it, I don't know what would have happened in COVID if we didn't have the social relief of distress grants. But the problem is it sustainable? Is it fiscally sustainable? I don't think it'll be sustainable over the very long run. In Brazil, what we saw is they also used this, but then the inequality started rising again when the problem is that people were moving out of the labor market, and what we actually need is people in jobs. And this is really one of the long-term solutions to inequality. So how do we get people into jobs? I don't think the government should create jobs. It's not their primary function. They did it in the financial crisis. It can be used as temporary measures. But it's actually the private sector that creates sustainable jobs. And that create, because it's what we call multiplier effects. If private sector invests, they create jobs which then connect in the supply chain to other jobs, and there's a ripple effect. So we need those big ripple effects. But what we do need government to do is to create regulations and to create things like infrastructure. Actually, in COVID, that was the big solution. Let's invest in infrastructure. That's also seen as a structural reform. It's one of the basic things that can lay a basis for other parts of the economy to build on top of.
Okay, but what I'm hearing you saying is like government can lay this foundation,
Yes.
but they're not actually going to solve the problem.
No.
And so I guess you've already mentioned, I want to try and get a little bit more personal, like what can we actually do, and there's a trajectory there.
Yeah.
So there's a few people with companies here.
Yeah.
Carl can employ more people, right? That's something that he can personally actually do in his business. He can, some of us can start businesses, right?
Yes.
So the private sector can do that type of thing, and that will, I think what you're saying is that type of thing will might help.
Yes.
And then, I guess the question is getting even more personal. Like just on a daily basis, I'm useless with money.
Yeah.
I don't even know what economy is in English.
Yeah.
And so, like on a very personal level, what can I do to help and actually address this? Okay, there's multiple big questions in there, but I'll let you rant for a little bit.
Okay, so the first thing, I said no to taxes. But
to raising taxes.
To raising taxes.
Okay.
But I said pay your taxes, please. Okay, be honest, pay your taxes. Okay, because it is important. But the other reason why I said there's a yes and a no to taxes. So what we need to do is when we have more jobs, we have a bigger tax base. Okay, and that's going to help, right? Because then we can create a virtuous cycle. There will be a sustainable social investment, right? Social investment in infrastructure, investment in our education system, investment in these like baseline things that are important for the very long run, investment in healthcare, investment in equality of opportunity, essentially. Okay, so pay your taxes, right? Pay fair wages if you're an employer. Okay, there's a lot of people who aren't paying fair wages. Okay. There's a lot of wage non-compliance. So we have minimum wages in South Africa. They're quite low. But pay fair wages so that the people who work for you actually can feed their children. Why? Because their children, their inequality starts now already for them. I said it starts in the womb. It really does. Even if one of your workers is pregnant, she has to eat well so that her children get a good birth weight, so that they're not stunted. In other words, they're not too short, because that's going to influence their cognitive ability and whether they can go to school. Right? So these things are all linked. Right?
Should we, this is a question I often think about, we're all, I think, across the board, pretty wealthy South Africans sitting in this room. Should we be looking to sacrifice some of our own wealth actively in order for things to... I mean, I often think about this as like, our medical system is extremely good in this country. I lived in Scotland for a bit. Our medical system is so much better than the public, the private medical, the bias in my head, right? So the private medical thing is so much better for us. And the thing I often wonder about is am I willing to sacrifice a little bit of that security that I have in Mediclinic Stellenbosch in order for that to spread out down below?
So this is double barrel answers. We economists, we're not engineers. We give 10 different answers to the same question.
Yeah, I realize that. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So let's think of this in the extremes. Okay, so I give away all my income. Okay, because if I gave something to everybody who asks me on a daily basis, I would have honestly nothing left, right? Because me as an individual, if I did it on my own, I would literally have nothing left. If I had to meet all the need that's around me. That's a reality. Does it mean I should give nothing? No. It means I need to give wisely. Okay. I mentioned this silly analogy to you, but I think it's quite a powerful analogy. I thought of this when we were traveling on an airplane.
Amy, can you hear? Okay.
Can you not hear? Okay. Let me. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. It's a silly analogy. When they tell you to put your mask on, they always tell you when the oxygen gets low, they always say help people around you. First help yourself, then help the people around you. Why do they do that? Because it doesn't help if I faint and I can't help anybody, right? So it does mean that if I gave away everything today and I've got nothing to give tomorrow, and the person who I've given it to also wasn't helped enough, then we're all down in the dumps. It's the apocalypse scenario. It's the whole thing of if we want to achieve equality of outcome, we could actually shoot ourselves in the foot. Okay. But there is definitely, we as Christians are called to give generously, right? You mentioned the healthcare system. Should I give up my private healthcare benefits and contribute to NHI? Is that really the question you're asking? Yes, we should. But we shouldn't destroy the healthcare system in the process. So it's a double-barrel answer. It's about saying, should I be giving? Should I be giving generously? Yes, we should. Should I be giving so that I'm incapacitated to give tomorrow? No. Right? I should still be in a position to be able to give tomorrow. Yes.
And this is obviously over and above tax, because that is a form of giving
Yes.
to a
Yes.
organized way of giving.
So if I'm a Christian, what happens in my heart, right? Tax, I can just convince myself I've done my bit, and it just came off my pay slip, and there we go. I've silenced my conscience, right? I'm good. I'm a good person. No, often it's what happens in the heart, right? And I often say give out of relationship. I can't give to everybody. That's a baseline. I've already said that. That's the extreme case. But I definitely give out of relationship. If I just gave randomly to everybody, and it could actually be destructive, right? What if I gave to somebody where I know they're going to use it for destructive purposes? Is that a good thing? Not necessarily. But if I give to somebody and I know, out of relationship, I know this person, we have a discussion, right? The Bible says, don't say, go forth and you're still hungry, right? The other is true. I can't just say, don't be hungry anymore and go forth. The same is also true. I also actually need to share what's inside and share the gospel with him. The two go together, right? Yeah.
So you say above and beyond taxes, how about tithing then?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. That's a very theological question. I'll give you my personal take on it, and I think maybe JP can help us here. I tithe because I think the church is an important part of reducing inequality, right? We see it in Acts where people were sharing with each other. We're commanded to help widows and orphans. Incidentally, our social grant system is amazing because it helps older people and it helps children. It's very biblical in that sense. But should we tithe? Yes, because if we believe that the church is a part of this, we should help the church to do what it's good at. And in some senses, civil society organizations are a very important part of solving inequality because often that's part of the heart, right? It's part of the building the relationship. It's not just solving it on, here's a check, go and sort out your problems, because checks don't sort out problems. Remember I said inequalities happen at very different levels. It's a value thing. It's a value thing. And if we build relationships, we're also giving somebody, we're affirming their value, but we're also giving them a sense of self-worth, which will also help them to get further in life.
Maybe you've answered this, but I have two questions. That two big questions. Oh, the one is very simple. Relates to this. If I walk out this door now on my way to the car, a beggar will ask me for money.
Yes.
Should I give him money, or her?
You really have to follow your conscience. Yeah, it's not like a clear yes or no. You really have to follow your conscience. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I've just been irritated and said no. Right, because it might be the fifth beggar today. And this is where I really have to know that I'm a Christian and I must trust that God will lead me. Because sometimes it might be that I need to give all 5 people I see that day something. Sometimes it might be no to all 5.
Yeah, that's very helpful, because what I do is I have a personal thing where I'm like, I give a blanket no.
Yes.
Because I'm like, oh, they might use, especially money.
Yeah.
Money is problematic because, I don't know what they'll use this money for. So I'll buy someone a piece of bread, but I won't give money.
Yeah.
And how I satisfy my conscience is that I'm like, I'll give money to a charity, once a month.
Yes.
And in that way, that will address that thing, and then I can walk away guilt-free.
Yeah.
Often I forget to give money to the charity, so that's a massive problem.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful to say that this is a case-by-case type of thing.
There is so Stellenbosch has a night shelter, and they do issue vouchers. So especially when you're thinking of homeless people who are the most destitute, it's really useful to have I actually don't know where to get those vouchers these days. In the past, they were easy to get. Yes, you've got them. There we go.
You can get them at the Quick Start and the Nielsen.
Yes. Yes.
That's extremely helpful.
It's extremely helpful, because often somebody will say, I don't have a place to sleep. Then you say, well, I'll give you, here's a place to sleep, right? There's an organization, I also don't know if they're still in operation, called Straatlig. Does anybody know, do they still operate? They're not in operation anymore. But they when they used to still be in operation, they used to advise actually not necessarily to give money, but to refer them to them, because often giving money can be self-destructive for an individual, because they might spend it on self-destructive ways. And often if you give it to an organization, as I said, they have relationship, and they can not just give the material means, but the material and the relational mean is, I think, very important. They need to be backed up by each other.
Jani?
I just want to, so I think there's a part of me becomes very, you become really convicted, and you think, I'm living way above my, we are living such a high standard of living. There's so much more that I can give. I have so much extra money, actually, if I had to really look at it. And then you get to this point where you think, like, how much can I really cut down? But my question is, for us who are sitting here, who are mostly well educated and who are people who have we can start businesses, we can do we can do the hard work. So for me, giving another 200, 300, 1,000 rand is not going to break the bank for us.
Yeah.
It might pacify my conscience, but I think what I'm hearing you saying is the real solutions is me starting a business, which is going to be hard work, which is going to change this labor inequality, which is going to address that. So it's easy for us to say, I'll tithe some more to a charity, but is that the actual working that's going to change this thing?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want to add a
Go
coal
first,
to the
and
fire?
then there was a hand up there as well. Go.
So I think the point is that we won't all start a business, right? Because we're not all good at that.
Yeah.
So I think we should move to our competitive advantage. But I think we already all have relationship with people who would be classified as poor in South Africa, and I think you can invest not only in money, and I think that's what you also said. So
Yes.
the research shows that money isn't the thing that often. The thing that cracks it is what they call like psychosocial interventions, and a lot of that is sort of motivational, but educational in how should you spend your money. Where's your child in school? Can I maybe
Yes.
help advise you on where to take your child next? Advice. I think we have a lot of soft information or hidden information that other people don't have access to. We might be the only access into that pool of knowledge, and so just sharing that and advising, I think, is also something that isn't monetary, but it is very useful for people.
So
Yeah.
relational.
Yeah.
Relational. I'd like to link onto that because I think if I have to give like a fancy term for this, we need a social compact. I realize this because people always say, can't we just do what Norway and Sweden does? Right? And this is kind of what you're hinting. Raise taxes, spend a lot, and it works there, right? It really does. They're very equal countries. So I came to the realize when I was in Norway, it doesn't work here because we don't have a social compact. If we don't...
Can you just explain what a social compact
A
is?
social compact means I don't want to say we think the same way, but we have a similar goal. We trust each other. And we have relationship with each other, and we believe that if I help you, you're not going to mess it up. So I'm like begrudgingly helping you because I think you're going to mess it up, okay? Or you take it, but I'm like, but I deserve it, right? It's this whole we need to trust each other. We need to trust. We need to trust that our leaders aren't going to be corrupt, but they must not be corrupt. They need to win our trust, right? And within these conditions, a social compact is a big dial shifter. That's to me a big thing. And it starts with small things like this, and this is where we can do this. We do things within relationship. We give people knowledge, but we build relationship with them. It sounds so fuzzy, but it is so important. And the problem with this is it's only going to work if everybody does it. That's what makes it so difficult.
Leonard, to a B.
So you spoke quite a lot about investing in relationships and people personally, and spending your time and your money into someone you know. But what about some of our other habits? Are there other like big dial shifters in where we spend our money, Woolworths or Checkers, and offshore investments? So if they're all just small, then you can say no, that the real thing's the social economy. But are there other big habits changes?
So you mentioned like where you invest your money, where you spend your money. So where you spend your money. So South Africa has highly concentrated industry, right? So whatever we've got the big 4 banks, maybe it's the big 5 now. We've got the big 3 cell phone companies. We've got the big 5 supermarket chains. It's always like the big 4, the big 5, whatever you're talking about. And this is kind of what you're saying. And often they might have like unsustainable practices. They might be in the Panama Papers for massive corporate corruption, whatever. So the question is it's almost often unavoidable to spend in this way. I think you will always trace your money back to somewhere where it's dirty. It's unavoidable. But can I consciously do that, right? So should I be spending on like local? I think that's a good idea. Can I do that? But often this whole thing of like spend local is also often an anomaly, because it's if you just think of this 10% tariff on solar panels that's come through, it's a great example. You know that all of those benefits are going to go to 2 companies. We like spend local, but it's going to go to 2 companies in South Africa, and they're going to get filthy rich.
Higher inequality.
And it's going to higher
inequality. Worse.
So you see, we often think in this way, and then we don't see that actually this is part of a big system, and our very noble intentions are probably not going to have the impacts that we would like them to have.
I'll take questions then, but
Sorry.
I want you to answer Toby's other question, which is, are there? Okay, Yanni said there's money to give. That's easy, but it's not going to.
Yeah.
Are there easy stuff that we can do that will make a big difference in our personal life, apart from spending?
I
Okay, and Carl has an answer,
Okay.
but Dieter will first answer,
Okay.
and then you ask the industrial engineer.
Can an individual make a big difference? I guess if you're like Elon Musk, maybe. Can Goose or Bill Gates or whatever the case might be. Can I make a big difference? Can I change the Gini coefficient by 1 percentage point? I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. Leonard, go.
Yeah.
I just want to circle back to your comment on pay fair wages. So I was farming for a few years. And we had about 20-25 staff members. And when I started, our salary for a month, the wages we paid was between 20 and 30,000. And in that 5 years, by the end of it, we were at 100,000 rand. For the same turnover, same staff, but it just massively jumped like that because the minimum wage at that point went up from 12 rand something up until
50%.
Yes, exactly. So what I saw happening was the turnover didn't change. So most businesses just started cutting jobs. And what they did with 2025 work is they're now doing with 5 or 10.
Yes.
So how does something like that improve quality of life or inequality? Because now minimum wage is raising the income for some people, but you're taking a lot of stability away. So is it better to pay what you can and give someone stability, or is it better to give them more money? Because in Stellenbosch, when we moved here, I saw a lot of that. Like people had a lot of domestics, and then COVID happened, and all these things happened, and people started cutting days, and now maybe domestic once a weekend. So many domestics started asking for jobs because they all lost their jobs.
That's a burning question. You know, it's actually something I've written about, and I actually have a PhD student who's handing in about this later this year. And you mentioned agriculture particularly, because this is what happened in agriculture, that jobs got cut. But the evidence we find is that it was temporary. Those people did find jobs back eventually. So on average, overall, the minimum wage didn't have these massive negative effects which we expected. In other sectors, they definitely didn't have these negative effects. And the simple reason is that minimum wages, I know you're saying that a lot of people struggle to pay minimum wages. The big firms in South Africa don't struggle to pay minimum wages because they're low. But it's smaller enterprises, and this is, it's that trade-off again. We want smaller enterprises to create jobs, but now we're asking them to pay high wages. Maybe what we need to do is make it easier for them to do other things. You mentioned households, it's true. Households have dropped, they've actually gone part-time. We see it in the data, we see it, that domestic workers are working part-time, we really see it. So what's better? That's a tough question to answer. I don't have like a silver bullet there.
Carl.
Yes.
I don't have a silver bullet, but big ticket items we spend on buying a house and buying a car.
Yes.
Does it make a difference whether we buy a car that's built in South Africa versus one that's built in Germany or in China?
Yeah, so this is the whole infant industry argument, if we have to have a nice term for it. Should I build a car that was manufactured in South Africa, or should I build a car that was manufactured Should I buy a car? Okay. So the question is it's about special. The economists would say to you, no, you should buy where it's. You should buy what's most efficient, and you should buy the Chinese car, and not the one manufactured in South Africa. Simple reason, let's go for the motor industry. The government has invested a lot of money in the motor industry to create these jobs. Should we sustain that jobs at such high cost? Shouldn't we be investing in other industries? I'm not going to give an answer to that question. I'm leaving it as a question, right?
But Carl's not just asking an economist, he's asking a Christian economist.
Yeah. Should we buy a car produced in South Africa? Is that a BMW?
Polo or a
Toyota Cross.
Toyota?
or a
Okay. Sure.
A blue Toyota Corolla Cross.
That one, yes. I wanted to say, fortunately I've done that, so my answer will not be hypocritical. My car was produced in South Africa.
Okay, that's also an answer.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not I'm afraid to put on my trade economist hat here.
Okay, Marisa, quickly, and then I'm going to ask 2 big questions, and then we'll almost wrap up. Go.
So I feel with a lot of this, there's the dream. So what can be done in the long run under perfect circumstances? And I think if policy changed, if we had good people in government, if our education system changed, if the labor market was freed up, all of those things would have big shifts. I think, but the point is that we live in the here and now, and we're severely constrained. And I think the point is that we're really, what each of us as an individual can do is very limited given the situation we're in. For a lot of these things you'll need big shifts. It's possible, but it's most likely a dream.
So the one question I have on my list, which we've touched on this with Natasha's question, I think, is about the church, the role of the church in all of this. I think individually we have a responsibility, but as a bigger body, we also have responsibility. And I've been reading up on the first century church, and they say they really tackled 3 massive things in a very strange, first century culture. They taught people how to read, so education. They did poverty relief, not just of other Christians, but of the people around them. And what was the other thing? Health. They provided healthcare, not just for other Christians. And this was a massive thing in that time. And you mentioned tithing, and you mentioned the church as kind of one of the good civil society initiatives, something that helps. But as a church, can we do more? Should the church start businesses, right?
Okay.
Right, that's what you're saying is the solution. And I think that there's work for a living is a thing in Stellenbosch, which a church started, right? Should we start businesses? Should we stop complaining at the rugby about the government should fix education in South Africa and actually say, well, the church should fix education in South Africa?
Yeah, so I mean, I know a lot of Christians who are doing that, right? So they see these education stats. This is someone we work with. And she and her husband started an NPO to tackle education. So that people could watch videos online to get a better education. So should the church be doing something? Yes. Individuals in the church should be doing something. Should is this something we as a church have done historically? Amy will know, right? Missionaries on this continent have made a massive difference in terms of education and health. Where have a lot of our leaders come from? From missionary stations. They went to missionary schools. We have a new postdoc now here who gathered where was the Bible translated. In those places today still, life is better. Life is better because on tangible things like literacy, but on tangible things like less poverty. So these things are there. And the church plays a massive role in that historically. I don't think this is a very hard thing to see. So have we stepped back from our role? We might have said, okay, so the government is doing this. So should we open up schools? I see this, I mentioned to you in our discussion, the UK is doing this a lot. When I lived in the UK, the church I went to, they actually started a school. Because the government was providing funding for private small community schools to start up, and the churches said, let's make use of it and let's start a school. And they did it. And they filled the gap because the community needed a school. They were giving good Christian education funded by the government, right? Ideally speaking, these private-public partnerships, public-private civil sector partnerships would be amazing. That to me is a social compact. It's us trusting each other to work together to build on our strengths. Can churches do things? Yes, they can. What's the first thing we should do? I can't give you that answer. Should for instance, all the churches in Stellenbosch start building schools? Maybe we need schools in Stellenbosch, maybe. Has this happened? Yes, there is a school that was started by Christians in Stellenbosch. It's called Calling Education. and they did it out of their conviction. Are they making a difference? From what I can see, oh yes, right. So these are some of the practical things. I think each of us need to individually follow our convictions and say, what is it that we can do? And we need to support each other in those convictions. Yes.
Okay, that's an excellent answer. Okay, we've got 2 minutes, and we will wrap up. Sorry, I hope I've taken enough questions. Like, if someone has a burning question, just quickly put up your hand, like something that will change my life. Okay, there were 3 hands. Okay, maybe you can share that after. Yeah, go. Sorry, that was following my conviction for some reason.
Yes.
Things that a lot of people do not have access as much. I don't know if you came from there somewhere. A lot of people don't have access to certain information because that information is not available in their language.
Yes.
Language has historically been sort of underdeveloped, not given attention to. I would also say, you talked about the informal sector, a lot of the languages, especially South Africa, African languages and so forth, have been limited to the informal sector, and because the informal sector is limited, those people have limited access to economic.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent comment.
Yeah, and so like, you see that because there is a lot of work being done to bridge that linguistic gap.
Yes.
Disseminate information into the
Yes.
language. Do you think that is a sensible thing to do?
Short answer.
No, I can't give a short answer to this question because this is a very important question. Okay, but must I give a short answer?
Yes, you
Okay.
must.
So, first of all, language and economic outcomes is very important. Where there's we call it linguistic fractionalization. A lot of diversity in languages, economies are worse off. That's a fact.
Interesting.
Right? That's a fact. There's also evidence for what we call ethnic niches, where you, like you say, you kind of group into occupations because I know somebody who speaks my language, and what you see is if people that speak my language are in an occupation that doesn't pay well, that's where I'm going to work. It really also manifests economically. But in terms of information, I think that's very, very important, because most of us read in our second language in this country, because most of it is done in English, but English is, in some senses, a minority language in South Africa, but it's the language that unites us. So what can we do? We could do mother tongue education and then switch over. That's currently what happens for the first 4 years, right? 3 years, mother tongue education. But should we expand that? But your solution is actually to make information more available in different languages. And that could be helpful. And I think we need to use technology to do that. Because something like an app is very easy to do. And with artificial intelligence, it's much easier to do this these days. So we need to use technology to bridge these kinds of gaps. And I think technology can help us a lot in that regard.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Dieter. I think I was there.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll have a follow-up talk with Marisa giving,
Yes,
like you,
Yes.
Dieter has laid the foundation.
And if any of you want to be on the TGIF mailing list, please give myself or Stella your email and we'll put you on and keep you informed about future conversations. I think this was just a starter, really. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you.